Nobody accidentally becomes worth hundreds of billions of dollars. So when a company like OpenAI suddenly finds itself sitting on a valuation that massive, the real question isn't how they got there. It's what happens next. Because the bigger the number gets, the harder it becomes to justify it. And right now, OpenAI is dealing with a problem that doesn't show up in headlines, but quietly decides whether companies at this level keep growing or slowly lose direction. Not competition, not regulation, something much more dangerous. Focus. At first glance, everything looks almost perfect. OpenAI is everywhere. It's in conversations, in products, in enterprise tools, in coding workflows, and in the center of what many people believe is the next major technological shift. It feels like one of those rare moments where a company is not just successful, but defining an entire category. From the outside, it looks like they've already won. But when you zoom in a little closer, the picture starts to shift. Because behind all the excitement, there's a quieter, more strategic change happening. A shift in priorities, a shift in direction, and more importantly, a shift in what the company is choosing not to do anymore. Here's the part that most people don't think about. When a company reaches a valuation this large, it stops being just a company. It becomes a story that has to be maintained. Investors are no longer just looking at what the company is building today, they are betting on what it will become over the next 5 to 10 years. And that means the company is expected to move in a clear, consistent direction. It needs to show progress that aligns with that story. Because the moment that direction becomes unclear, the confidence behind that valuation starts to weaken. The challenge is that OpenAI is not built around a single, clear product. It's not like a company that sells one thing at scale and keeps improving it. Instead, it exists across multiple layers at the same time. It's building consumer tools, enterprise solutions, coding assistants, developer platforms, and advanced research systems. Each of these areas has different needs, different timelines, and completely different paths to success. And managing all of them at once sounds impressive, but it comes with a cost. Because eventually, every company runs into the same limit. You cannot prioritize everything equally. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because choosing where to focus is not just about what works, it's also about what gets left behind. And recently, there are clear signals that OpenAI is leaning more heavily toward enterprise products and coding tools. That shift makes sense from a business perspective. Enterprise clients bring consistent revenue. Coding tools have direct productivity value. These are areas where companies are willing to pay and pay repeatedly. And when you're sitting at a massive valuation, predictable revenue becomes extremely important. But that also creates a tension, because the thing that made OpenAI famous in the first place wasn't stability, it was experimentation, it was pushing boundaries, it was building things that felt new, surprising, and sometimes even chaotic. And those kinds of ideas don't always fit neatly into enterprise products. They don't always generate immediate revenue, but they are often what create the biggest breakthroughs. So when a company starts shifting towards safer, more structured products, it raises an important question. Are they becoming more focused, or are they becoming more limited? Think of it like running multiple experiments at once. In the early stages, you try everything. You explore different ideas, different approaches, different use cases. That's where innovation comes from. But as the company grows, that freedom starts to shrink. Not because the ideas are bad, but because the expectations are higher. Investors want clarity, partners want stability, and leadership needs to show that resources are being used efficiently. So slowly, experiments start getting cut. Not all at once, but gradually, and each cut brings the company closer to a defined direction, but further away from the flexibility it once had. Now add competition into the picture. Because OpenAI isn't the only one moving fast. Big tech companies are investing massive amounts of money into AI. We're talking about hundreds of billions being poured into infrastructure, data centers, and new systems. These companies have advantages that are hard to compete with. They control distribution, they own ecosystems, they can integrate new tools directly into products that billions of people already use. Which means OpenAI is not just building technology, it's constantly defending its position in a space where others have deeper control.
And this is where the focus problem becomes more than just an internal decision. It becomes a survival strategy. Because when you're competing at this level, spreading yourself too thin can be just as dangerous as moving too slowly. If you try to do everything, you risk not doing anything well enough to dominate. But if you narrow your focus too much, you risk missing the next major shift. And in a space evolving this quickly, missing that shift can change everything. There's also another layer to this that makes it even more complicated: expectations. When a company reaches a valuation like this, it is no longer judged based on what it has built, it is judged based on what people believe it will build. The future gets priced in early, and that means the company is constantly being compared to a version of itself that doesn't exist yet. Every new product, every decision, every delay gets measured against that expectation. And if the company's direction starts to feel unclear, that gap between expectation and reality becomes a problem. And here's something most people don't realize: the more funding a company raises, the less freedom it actually has, because every dollar comes with pressure. Pressure to grow, to perform, to justify decisions, and to stay aligned with the bigger story. That pressure doesn't always show up publicly, but it shapes how the company moves. Instead of experimenting freely, decisions become more calculated, more careful, and sometimes that caution slows things down. At the same time, the technology itself is moving incredibly fast. New models are being developed, new tools are being released, new capabilities are constantly being discovered, which means the window to lead in this space is always shrinking. You need to move quickly to stay ahead, but you also need to move carefully to avoid making costly mistakes, and those two requirements don't always match. One pushes you forward, the other pulls you back. This creates a strange balance. On one side, there's speed. On the other, there's precision. And maintaining both at the same time is extremely difficult. If you move too fast, you risk instability. If you move too carefully, you risk falling behind. And when the entire industry is accelerating, even small delays can have big consequences.
This is why focus becomes such a critical factor. Because without it, resources get scattered, teams get divided, priorities become unclear, and progress slows down in subtle ways that are hard to notice at first. But focusing too aggressively comes with its own cost, because every decision to prioritize one path means stepping away from another. And in a field where the future is still uncertain, those decisions carry long-term risks. So what does OpenAI actually do from here? Does it double down on enterprise products, building stable systems that generate consistent revenue? Or does it continue pushing experimental ideas that could redefine the industry again? The answer is not simple, and it's not something that can be solved with a single decision. It's a continuous trade-off between stability and innovation, between clarity and exploration. Because at this level, the biggest challenge is no longer building something valuable, it's staying aligned with the story that made people believe in that value in the first place. And once a company reaches this scale, changing that story becomes incredibly difficult. When people look at OpenAI today, they see a company at the center of a massive technological shift. They see growth, influence, and momentum, but what they don't see is the internal balancing act that comes with it, the constant decisions about where to focus, what to build, and what to leave behind. And those decisions matter more than anything else. Because in the end, the biggest risk isn't competition, it isn't regulation, it isn't even technology, it's losing clarity. It's reaching a point where the company becomes so large, so complex, and so stretched across different directions that it can no longer move with the same purpose that made it successful in the first place. And that's the real problem. Because when you get big enough, you don't just have to win, you have to stay focused while everyone expects you to do everything at once. And that is a much harder game to play.